only had a crew of 3. And if you're flying a visual flight plan in a crowded airspace like this, they really should have had 2 crew chiefs in the back of the helicopter to clear each side, as the pilots only have visibility from straight ahead 12 to 3 o'clock, or 12 from 9 o'clock to 12 o'clock. So you only have visibility of the front 180 degrees. Your crew chiefs clear the back. If you only have 1 crew chief, how much can you clear?
A devastating mid-air collision near Washington, D.C. has claimed the lives of 67 individuals. On Wednesday evening, an American Airlines passenger plane collided with a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter over the Potomac River just outside Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. The crash resulted in both aircraft plunging into the icy waters, with no survivors. The American Airlines flight, en route from Wichita, Kansas, was preparing to land at the airport when it collided with the Black Hawk, which was conducting a training exercise. Among the victims were members of the U.S. figure skating team, including teenage athletes returning from a national competition, highlighting the tragedy's profound impact on the sports community. Preliminary investigations suggest that the Black Hawk was operating above its permitted altitude at the time of the collision. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, has since restricted helicopter flights near the airport to prevent future incidents.
Each side for visibility. That's the first one. The second one is whether they were on night vision goggles at that time or not, it is a very cluttered airspace with a lot of lighting and the lights reflecting on the river. And so with that, it's easy to kind of get a little disoriented as far as the height. They were supposed to be at 200 feet, which is the helicopter routing in that area, and it wouldn't have been a conflict, but they were not at 200 feet. Obviously, reportedly, the incident happened at around 350 to 400 feet as the airliner was descending. So that they were at the wrong height, so that's a pilot error. The first would be a policy error or choice. And then the third is air traffic control said, do you have the CRJ in sight? Well, there were two aircraft in their field of view, and actually only one was really obvious to them, and that was if you watch the video, the aircraft taking off.
This incident marks the deadliest air disaster in the United States in over 2 decades, underscoring the critical need for stringent air traffic control measures and thorough investigations to prevent such tragedies in the future. On January 29, 2025, a tragic mid-air collision near Washington, D.C. claimed the lives of all 67 individuals aboard 2 aircraft. An American Eagle flight, operating as American Airlines Flight 5342, was en route from Wichita, Kansas, to Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. The aircraft, a Bombardier CRJ700 series regional jet, was on its final approach to the airport when it collided with a U.S. Army Sikorsky UH-60 Black Hawk helicopter. The Black Hawk, operated by the 12th Aviation Battalion, was conducting an annual night evaluation flight for one of its pilots out of Davison Army Airfield in Fairfax County, Virginia. The collision occurred over the Potomac River, approximately half a mile from the approach end of runway 33 at Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. Both aircraft crashed into the river, resulting in the loss of all 64 passengers and 4 crew members aboard the American Eagle flight, and all 3 personnel aboard the Black Hawk helicopter.
The trouble is, at that low an altitude, the system is silenced because there's no real space to make manoeuvres. It's also worth noting that in America they have slightly different air traffic control systems to the UK, and according to a retired BA captain, that gives American pilots more autonomy.
Our philosophy of controlled airspace is entirely different. In UK, all traffic in controlled airspace is under direct control of the radar controller, and there's no equivalent of the American see and avoid.
Among the victims were 14 members of the U.S. figure skating team, including teenage athletes returning from a national competition. The loss of these young athletes has deeply affected the sports community. Preliminary investigations have revealed several contributing factors to the collision. The air traffic control tower at the time was operating with significantly fewer controllers than recommended, leading to confusion over flight paths. One controller was managing both planes and helicopters simultaneously, which may have contributed to the miscommunication. Additionally, the Black Hawk helicopter was operating above its permitted altitude at the time of the collision. The complex airspace near Reagan National Airport, known for its dense helicopter traffic, further complicated the situation. In response to the incident, the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, has restricted helicopter flights near the airport. The FAA partially closed both the route that the Black Hawk was on when it collided with the CRJ700 and another route that runs south of the Key Bridge in Washington and connects the neighborhood of Georgetown to Rosslyn, Virginia. These routes, designated Route 4 and Route 1 respectively, remain open only to police, medical, air defense, and presidential transport flights. This incident marks the deadliest air disaster in the United States in over 2 decades, underscoring the critical need for stringent air traffic control measures and thorough investigations to prevent such tragedies in the future. Transport Secretary Sean Duffy also indicated that the helicopter pilot was aware of the nearby plane. Despite this awareness, the collision occurred, raising questions about the effectiveness of the communication and the actions taken by the helicopter crew in response to the warning. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, is conducting a thorough investigation to determine the exact causes of the collision. The recovered black boxes from both aircraft are being analyzed to provide further insights into the events leading up to the crash. This incident underscores the critical importance of clear communication and adherence to air traffic control instructions to ensure the safety of all individuals in the airspace. Recordings of air traffic control conversations published online suggested that a controller tried to warn the helicopter about the American Airlines plane in the seconds before the collision. The helicopter pilot appeared to respond to confirm they were aware of the plane, but moments later the two aircraft hit each other. Transport Secretary Sean Duffy also said he thought the helicopter was aware of the plane nearby. Joining Duffy at a briefing on Thursday, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth added that the helicopter was on an annual proficiency flight, performing a night evaluation, and the crew had night vision goggles. The collision happened at about 21 local time, 2:00 GMT, as the plane approached Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport. One eyewitness, Ari Schulman, told NBC Washington that the plane's approach looked normal until he saw it bank hard to the right, with streams of sparks running underneath the craft, illuminating its belly, which he believed to look very, very wrong. Another eyewitness, Jimmy Mazzeo, recalled seeing what looked like a white flare in the sky. He remarked that planes approaching the airport appeared to have been flying in irregular patterns. After the impact, the passenger plane broke into multiple pieces and sank several feet into the river, while the helicopter ended up upside down on the water. Hundreds of first responders on rubber boats were deployed to search for survivors. Officials highlighted the challenging conditions in which they were working due to ice floating on the freezing cold river and contending with the plane wreckage. They later said they did not expect to find any survivors and had changed the focus of their mission to focus on recovering bodies. Details are emerging about the 64 people who were on board the plane, who included top figure skaters as well as 4 crew members. Meanwhile, the helicopter was carrying 3 soldiers.